They may be. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Hello, colleagues. Thank you for joining us. We are going to wait a few minutes to see if we have late people who are logging in. Great to see you. Thank you for being here. We'll just wait a minute or two. We understood we had 188 people registered for this event. So, and we're seeing considerably less. But we're more and more, but this is good. We're going to have a very wonderful and vibrant discussion. So why don't we get started? Thank you. Welcome again. Here we're going to just show our Canva deck. And thank you and welcome once again to the Debt Crisis and its Impact on Women Conversation Circle. I'm Rosa Lazardi. I am the Vice Chair of the NGO CSW New York. That is my volunteer work as the Executive Committee member. My real job is as Global Director of the Feminist Task Force. And as the task force, we are the convener of the Women's Working Group on Financing for Development. And we are here at the Conversation Circle to take a deeper dive into one of the issues that is of utmost importance related to our priority theme of the Commission on the Status of Women here at the UN. You can see my background. My office is right across the street from the UN, facing the Secretariat building. If you are in New York, it's popularly known as the Church Center of the United Nations. So we are here at the Commission on the Status of Women, looking at pertinent issues related to addressing women's poverty and strengthening financial institutions. And one of the main issues related to that is the issue of the global debt crisis. If we can move on to the next slide, just to highlight, I mean, we know that extreme poverty rates have been increasing since the COVID pandemic. And we see that now approximates are at 690 million people living in extreme poverty since 2023. We know that at least amount are women and children who will continue living in extreme poverty if we are continuing with the rates that we are currently in. And this, according to the Secretary General, what we've heard him report last week at a UN town hall. And we know that women and girls generally account for 70% of all people living in poverty. And this percentage has not wavered in decades, and that is of a concern. And we know that there is a debt and climate change connection, where the climate change estimates are that it will push more women and girls into poverty. And you see the statistic here. The statistics here. Can we move on to the next slide? Focusing on the debt crisis, we are seeing, we are seeing very close connections of how the debt crisis exacerbates women's poverty by primarily diverting resources away from social services, healthcare, education, social protection, and diverting from addressing climate change through a just transition, and mitigation and adaptation. So the servicing of the debt is obligatory to governments. It is not optional. So first and foremost, the payments will go to servicing the debt into the pockets of foreign creditors, and that may be multinational banks, but it also, in the case of some countries, it is to the private sector, such as it is in with regard to Gambia debt being owned by BlackRock, a multinational corporation. We know that the majority of the donor countries have yet to fulfill their 0.7% of gross national product, GNP, for official development assistance, ODA. That is something that is very continuously put forth, not only in areas of financing for development, but even in this commission as well. And we know the high rates of the numbers of countries in severe debt stress due to numerous factors, as we mentioned, climate change, the pandemic, and overall trying to provide for the needs of one's country. Next slide, please. Again, talking about the climate debt connection, we are advocating as NGO CSW for the cancellation of debt, because we know that there are multi-crises that we are living with, climate change being one, the debt being another, and we see that governments from the global south are spending 12 times more on repaying the debt than they are on addressing climate change. Moreover, they are being forced to exploit their natural resources, including fossil fuels, to generate revenue for the debt payments. And we know that this issue of debt and the debt crisis is not new, and it's no accident. It stems from past years and colonialism to present day. And we know that primarily countries in Africa, Latin America, Asia, and the Caribbean have been forced to rely on taking on debts to make ends meet. Again, since the COVID pandemic, we have seen this increase. So I'm going to turn over to my colleagues for this next slide. But first, let me just tell you, we are providing some background so that then we can go into breakout groups. So all of this we can review in the breakout groups as well. But we want to turn now to Laila Mansour, who will review these key recommendations from the NGO CSW Advocacy and Research Group. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks so much, Rosa. Pleasure to be here. Thanks everyone for joining us today. My name is Laila. I am a current law student. I currently reside in Toronto, Canada. Pleasure to be here. Actually, my undergrad was in economics before I pivoted into the law. I work with a lot of immigrant newcomers to provide them with access to justice and legal information. And I know that debt is always an issue for many, newcomers and immigrants who are struggling to get on their feet in a new country, which certainly exacerbates, a lot of current and ongoing debt issues worldwide. So here are some key recommendations from the NGO CSW expert group. And so first recommendation is that governments must recognize and address social services such as health, education, water, and sanitation, among others, while lowering the public and private debt levels that have been increasing to alarming, unprecedented levels. And so these are the areas that must be prioritized in a sense, as opposed to investing, as Rosa mentioned, other things such as fossil fuel consumption to pay off debts, which is very concerning and also impedes our ability to combat climate change. Secondly, donor countries must fulfill their commitment to 0.7% of gross national product, GNP, for official development assistance and further earmark funds for gendered equality and women's rights organizations. A common theme this year is the reduction of funds for many feminists and gender equality and women's rights organizations. So unfortunately, we're seeing less and less funds going to such important work. And second and lastly, leaders must support debt cancellation for recovery from the global downturn while investing in gender-sensitive public services, the care economy, and climate resistance. And the impact of the coronavirus pandemic on debt budgets has been incredibly devastating for low and middle income countries. It has posed a lot of barriers for not only governments, but grassroots and local organizations. And unfortunately, a tremendous amount of debt has been taken on, and there's a lot of questions about how this can be paid off. So you can see more about these recommendations on the NGOCSW.org website. I'm going to pass it on to my colleague Angeline to tell you a little bit more on the impact in her region. She will speak from a very personal experience. So please introduce yourself, Angeline. Over to you.
Thank you, Lila. Am I audible? Okay, audible. Hi, everyone. My name is Angeline Eugenia. I am a researcher and also a consultant in the field of women's economic empowerment and gender justice. I'm currently the regional leader of Girl Up Southeast Asia. Girl Up is a girl-centered leadership development initiative that focuses on the equity for girls and women in spaces where they're oftentimes unheard or underrepresented. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the impact of the financial and debt crisis that happened in the 90s in Asia and also in my country, Indonesia, and one of the solutions that they implemented by then. So the Asian financial crisis that swept across Asia in 1997 until 1999 exposed some weaknesses in the global trade economy, and the crisis showed just how little is required to trigger a financial panic and how quickly a panic can become an economic and debt crisis. However, this kind of panics can actually be prevented or contained by social safety net policies. If there are safety net policies that are effective in a country, those policies are usually the ones that reflect the social and economic conditions of women in all the layers of society, and also gender and climate responsiveness. Weaving gender into a country's social safety net isn't a simple task, as industrialized countries have established social insurance systems that blend private and public sector programs to protect workers and their dependents. These include programs that provide benefits in the event of disability, job-related injuries, unemployment, old age, or death. And the social insurance system established by this industrialized economy were built around the concept of women as dependent spouses in legally bound marriages, whose earning from economic activity would be supplementary family incomes. However, this concept is no longer relevant nowadays, as it doesn't fit the economic reality, if it ever did, as women are now increasingly take formal sector employment and acquire their own independent rights to unemployment insurance, pension funds, and healthcare benefits. So the Asian model of development rested on the assumption that export-led employment of a well-educated, flexible labor force could eliminate the poverty and ensure employment security. This approach may have been responsible for the reduction in poverty in our country and also our neighboring countries in Asia. However, this approach also led to vulnerability to our country and also our neighboring countries in Asia, as women in Asian countries, as maybe elsewhere, continue to confront this kind of social barriers that crowd them into some industries that foreclose entry into others and generally push them onto the margins of economic life. Women are usually less hired, the first fired, and the least likely to qualify for benefits offered by their employers or provided by the government. And a device such as an unemployment insurance program could have greatly reduced this kind of social impact that women face in economic crisis. And because protecting family incomes help keep the economy moving, this kind of investment can help in reducing the length and severity of economic downturns and also economic crisis. And I think most social insurance program and or social safety net program in Asia are usually employment based. But however, women in Asia are usually employed in the informal sector, agricultural sector, or in small family-run enterprises, and are usually oftentimes excluded from this kind of insurance, compensation, or even medical or maternity coverage. And this is why social safety nets for women, especially for women coming from lower economic backgrounds, and also those who are most marginalized, are very important. And next up, I'm going to hand over the mic to Karin from Sonta International. Over to you, Karin.
Thank you so much, dear Angeline, for this very powerful insights in the structures and problems in the Asian region. Yes, just to introduce me shortly, I'm a PR consultant and media expert localized in Berlin, and as a UN advocacy chair of Sonta International District 27, I'm really happy to join you all today. Sonta International is an international human rights organization committed to building a better world for women and girls, and Sonta International holds general consultative status with the United Nations Economic and Social Council and participatory status with the Council of Europe. So, well, after all those interesting informations and insights, I would now open our breakout sessions, and I would like to introduce you to the questions we provided for that. Please let us discuss them better all or choose a priority as you may like it. First question is, how do you see the handling of the debt crisis in your own country? And what does this mean for women and girls? And then what does this mean in the global context, as well as what should be addressed with priority? Are you doing advocacy with your government? That's the last on the CSW zero draft. That's what we want to know from each other. So, well, I think we now can join our breakout sessions and are best prepared.
We will put the questions in the chat as well, so you all have them.
Well,
So,
I think perhaps 3 breakout groups would be great, and then we'll come and join in.
I also want to acknowledge our co-coordinator, Rachel Guerrero, who's helping us in the background. And also I put our co-facilitators' names in the chat. Karen Lang, Lila Mansour, and Angeline Eugenia Arias Tantia. And please check out the fellows' bios. They are part of the first ever cohort of NGO CSW. Okay, so you might see a screen to join a group. So please do. We're back. Thank you. I think, Angeline, you're doing this wrap-up part. If we can have the next slide. Yeah, there you go. Thanks.
Yeah, I can lead that. So we're very curious to hear about what conversations were taking place in your rooms. I know I think a big takeaway from our room was, you know, the importance of education in different contexts, either empowering women through education to be able to engage in economic or other activity in their communities. Education also in the context of just educating women, and I think everyone, about how to better manage their money. The impacts of, the long-term impacts of taking out a loan, for example, in a personal or business context. I think we could all use a lot more education in how to better manage money and funds. So if anyone would like to, tell us maybe a takeaway they had from the conversation, or if there was a question that you didn't get to answer and you wish to answer it now, that's okay. We're going to have a conversation for the next probably 15 minutes. And then we'll have one more little slightly shorter discussion group in the remaining time. Don't be shy.
I just want to point that I mentioned the climate emergency affecting all these areas. And if we women don't tackle that, we will not get financial help. So the climate emergency should be our axis to demand money, to demand financial help for all our great activities and areas that we are working. That's my point of view. Thank you.
Thanks, Laura. I really appreciated your comment. A statement that you put in the chat in our group really stuck with me, is that, finance for climate emergency with women taking decisions should be our roadmap to action. I really love that statement. I agree with that very much. And you also pointed out things like, big pharma, big plastic, big oil are kind of impeding our ability to invest in things that are going to have much more impactful return for our communities in the long term. So I really love this.
Yes, my dear young girl. Yes, it's true. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Laura, so very much.
Thank you to you. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Does anyone else have any other comments?
In our group, and I do want to give time to people who were vocal in my group. And in my group, Monica, here, where are you, if you're still here? Monica Ketchum Cardenas was mentioning the point about the US debt and how it's 124% of a gross domestic product, GDP. And I would like to invite Monica to just make some of those points. They're very salient points. And if you can just touch on those, if you don't mind, not to put you on the spot. But just so that we have participation from others. You as an educator, and I love that, you're an educator and you're going back to school to study global affairs. Do you want to touch on those points? It was an interesting one about the US debt. And then Apu from Bangladesh also made some really critical points about individual loans, especially by women in Bangladesh, and how support was needed there. And so I invite either one to share in this group. Monica?
Well, I think my point was just that we don't really address the point that the United States carries such a tremendous debt. And when we're looking at our priorities within our own country and within the globe, we seldom prioritize women's issues, and we seldom prioritize, you know, lifting up the most vulnerable. And, you know, we continue to spend on things that are not essential to addressing problems of poverty. We continue to spend on military rather than spending on social services, and basic services and health and things like that. And I mean, my point was, if we continue in this direction, both nationally and globally, where are we going to end up in the end?
Thank you. And Apu, I think you made a couple of points as well. If you're still here. Apu
Hi,
Chandra Roy?
I'm here.
Yes, thank you.
Yeah, that's the thing I was saying, that women's support still, I feel that's less than what they need. Like, as you said, the education, healthcare, and in food and opportunity to get involved in the work. This is very small, what I see locally in my places around my area. Like, so we need to think that how the women could get more opportunity, like by the support. Like, they need opportunity to get a start on business, or like through the training, or like how they can get involved in the business sector, because they has dreams, they has strong confidence on themselves. They can do. They're trying to get involved in the education. They are also learning the local things they can make. They can create. So this is, I'm saying, and also I'm saying that there is lack of like hygiene care of the women health care. This is also needed, like easy access for them. Need more supports to get them involved, to get opportunities. That's all.
Great, thank you.
Yes, we also in our group had a very vital discussion, and thanks so much to all the attendees. First of all, we noticed, of course, that the tackling of debts in the countries leads to many disadvantages for women and girls, and also cause intergenerational troubles and conflicts, as Katie Barraza from Chile stated. And yeah, one thing was that struck me was that lots of the participants had the feeling, or also the impression, that it's not clear on which conditions it goes with debts and the debt policies. That's not transparent, and that all of the sudden lands notice that they defaulted, and so, and they there's a huge miscalculation as well. And yeah, one thing that was really important to all was cancel the debts. That's what was a clear thing to all, that this is very important. And all of them. And then I loved the comment from Celie Moore. Governments should facilitate participatory, transparent, and accountable governance principles that ensure women's rights to full, equal, effective, and meaningful participation and effective inclusion of the priorities in decision-making regarding public debt acquisition and the terms of borrowing and loans from bilateral and multilateral lenders, and decisions about the domestic financial resources, public goods and services affected to cover the debt principles and interest, and any subsequent fiscal policies that governments adopt to ensure just debt servicing. Yeah, it's about debt justice, and it's also about the economic system behind it, and about participation of the women on all levels of decisions, also in the financial sector, but of course also in the government, in the financial ministries, and so on and so forth. And that's what we have to advocate for more strongly. So, well, I would love to ask you, Celie and Micheline from Madagascar, and also Katie, if you'd like to add something, because I sure didn't cover it all.
No,
How
I
about-
think you did. I think you did. You did very well. Thank you.
Okay.
I will just add, please, Karine, if you allow me.
Yes.
This is Micheline. I just wanted to add that it is very important that we remain engaged in this debate on the debt, because it is not just about the volume of the debt, it is the process by which our government are getting the debts. It is a very opaque process. We do not know when, how, where, for which reason these debts are being contracted on our behalf, in our names as citizens of a country. So there has to be, we should demand, not just say lobby or advocate, but demand to our government that we are part. If they want to make a decision on debt, they should hear what debt repayment means for women and girls of all ages, what services they don't get on the health perspective, what they don't get in terms of salary, what they don't get in terms of work, employment, and rights, and so that they are aware that it has a real effect on people's lives. It's not just about calculation of percentage. That's one thing. The second advocacy I think that we should do is really with Parliament. When Parliament approves the budget of a government, we should know what proportion of this budget comes from citizens' taxation income, and which proportion is the government going to go and borrow money to the international institution. We have the right to know this, and we need to understand how the process, how the mechanism, how the process of budgeting works, so that we know how much is available to the government and they are not spending on us, and how much they are going to borrow to do all kinds of frivolous things for which we have to pay later. So that's just me being hungry. Sorry, I'm just hungry.
Yeah, okay.
I love it. Love it.
Yeah, I love it. It's a good point.
I would like to add, this is Katy from Chile. I would like to add that we can't make it alone. This is a political problem, and I think that we have to be together, women, in electing those women that represent our intentions. And I think that is very important, because our political representatives go to the parliament and they discuss the laws that we need to be passed. That's it.
True. Thank you.
Leila?
Wonderful. No, I no other specific comments from me.
Just a point on, I didn't see the name of the woman who was speaking about, let's make note of what women don't get. I think that that is a very important point, because we know in a sense what women are not getting. We've done a lot of measuring since COVID, because that's when we saw a lot of the services dip down. But specifically, I think in terms of the country work on the ground, I think that it would be a great campaign, a great approach to say, this is what we're missing now, and this is what we need, and where is that money going? And if we can get that money from servicing the debt to these services on the ground in country, that's what we need. That I loved hearing that. That's a great like campaign there. There it is.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Rosa. I think that was Micheline from Madagascar. Is she still here?
Yes, I'm here. I
Yes.
listen to you, Rosa. Yeah.
Yes. Good
Okay.
point.
I think just in the spirit of time and we want to have a couple more activities over the next half an hour before each of us go our own ways back to our communities. We'll go to the next slide. And then we'll have another short conversation second. We just have a few updates for you.
Yeah, I mean, very quickly, this is my slide. Just to point out that Secretary General Antonio Guterres had a town hall with civil society with members of the CSW last week. I don't know if some of you saw it. It was very kind of candid. He mentioned that they've proposed this SDG stimulus of 500 billion a year. And we know that we need about 360 billion to even out and address gender inequalities. So this is a longer term finance for developing countries to turbocharge progress on SDG 5 and gender equality. That is a proposal, and it also calls for action on the debt. So I think that this issue of debt is getting traction. What we've heard is that this is new language in the CSW, but we want there to be something in the CSW outcome document, because we know that, countries are facing these impossible repayment schedules. And also, I think that, this issue of tax, and having progressive tax for women, that's very important, because we know that there are regressive taxes on women, and sometimes we don't even know they're taxes. We don't call them that, but let's say women go to the market to sell their wares, and they have to use the bathroom, right? The toilet. They're charged for that. That's a tax. That's a fee. They have to pay a fee to just have a space there. All of these are regressive taxes. So, and taxes are related to the debt, because generating taxes in country help repay the debt. So just to point this out, I'll put the link in the chat for anyone who wants to, watch this town hall. There's some quite interesting things. So next slide, please. I think that, Angeline, this is yours.
Yes, thank you, Rosa. Sorry, okay, I think it was delayed. So before we move on to another breakout session after this, let's look at these 3 key recommendations that's set out in the agreed conclusion as of March 7. So the first one, they call for an international development finance system that is fit for purpose and promotes gender equality and the empowerment of all women and girls. A system that is capable of addressing the policy challenges of developing countries, including low and middle income developing countries, especially in Africa. And the second one, they call for bold, ambitious, and gender responsive reforms to create a stable, sustainable, and inclusive international financial architecture that reverses the negative impact of the global economic and financial crisis on the realization of all human rights, including the rights of women and girls, and addresses long-standing gaps, weaknesses, and inequalities in the international financial system. And lastly, they also call for an enabling economic environment and enhance international cooperation that strengthen the effort of low-income countries to finance public goods and services through domestic public resources and to reduce inequality through redistribution. Next slide, please. So we're gonna go back to the breakout rooms, but before that, maybe Karin, you can fill us in with the questions.
Yes, thank you so much. Well, what we asked ourselves, and I hope this also is interesting for you, is what does debt relief cancellation mean for women and girls? And what kind of debt relieving economy do we want? How can we build an economy which serves us instead of us serving the economy? And what are you missing most in the revised zero draft? So, well, it's just about asking ourselves if we probably are still thinking within the boundaries of a broken economy. And yeah, so that's we should probably discuss now. Again, we can discuss all of the questions or choose our priorities. And I hand it over now to our facilitator to please put us in the breakout sessions again. Thank you so much.
All right, that's resume. That's resume. Sorry, it just gave me a pop-up message. So in our conversation group, we're talking about, you know, the importance of transparency of our governments, because we can't really critique what they're doing if they're not telling us how they're making their decisions about taking on debt and that thing. That was a really great comment made in our full group discussion previously. And so we kind of discussed that a little bit further. And we were able to share something. I'm not going to go into too much depth here, but I'm going to encourage all of you to look into it. Something called donut economics. We had a conversation about that in our group, and about understanding how to spend within our means as economies. It's a wonderful kind of new framework about thinking about this kind of economics as being, you know, kind of circular, as opposed to like constantly wanting skyrocketing growth, which has, you know, contributed to climate change, to, you know, taking on more and more debt to meet economic and other goals. So I do encourage all of you to learn more about that kind of new framework. I see your hand up, Rosa.
Yeah, just to share about what contributions came through in our group, and Sandy talked about just how we are, at least in the United States, and I know that this is probably in other areas, how we're so polarized, you know, and how you know, we have to continue to be strong advocates, you know, politically and financially. How this is a really good learning experience, listening and being able to share with networks. And also Monica talked about how we really need to make sure that all stakeholders are at the decision-making table. You know, I love the point about, you know, it maybe if we only had just experts looking at this issue, and I feel like sometimes that's what is happening at the UN, like we're just getting the experts and our thing is being really fixed. And I think that was the point. We need all types of stakeholders, you know, grassroots women, rural, from, you know, different communities at the table to be able to voice the concerns, to be able to talk about their problems in order to fix the problems. So I took that as a really great point, especially for this issue. as it impacts the most marginalized and vulnerable communities. And I just put in the chat some resources regarding these major debt organizations from the developing world. Latin Dad, which is for Latin America and the Caribbean on debt and development, and then Afro Dad, which is based in Africa on debt and development. And then there's also Euro Dad, which I'll put here in the chat. And these are primarily advocates, experts on debt.
Wonderful. Much appreciated.
And there's a group from
Thank you.
Asia Pacific called Asian People's Movement for Debt and Development. And they have an annual campaign to cancel the debt. So I will put this here. They also make a very strong link between debt and the climate crisis.
Wow, that's great. Thank you so much. I would love to add from my group, which was also really very engaged in the discussion, a few points. And to add to, well, on the one hand, of course, cooperate with all together, all kind of women organizations to advocate for debt cancellation, and also for more transparency and for being at the tables on decision making. That's for sure. That's one. The other was, of course, that we also need a scholarship in that field, and that we should think also not only, of course, that's true about the government debts, but also the personal debts, and the which yeah, sometimes could be a vehicle for well-being, but that was questions that I think are never common goods. That was also a point of our discussion, and it was really interesting for me also to listen to Laurie Johnson. She was talking for the indigenous communities, which are really left behind, and she said that UN financial systems and instruments are causing a debt, and instead of promoting the opposite and given yeah, financial justice, and they also, well, as the indigenous really know about reconstructive and redistributive economy since generations. This should also be taken in mind, and that's very interesting if it comes to question the economy of growth, like Laila was referring from her group. And I also would love to recommend you the donut economy, and yeah, to look at this, because I think that also considers what Rosa said about the polarization in societies. If we look in the inner circle of the society, what makes a community thrive, then we have to take into account as well the nature. We have to take into account gender equity. We have to take into account social justice. All those things, which doesn't include the GDP, the gross domestic product. Yeah, so we have to think about another index of economy, a well-being index, which takes into account that, and which helps us to thrive within the planetary boundaries. And that's, I think, something very beautiful to look on and to discuss, and which hopefully isn't, again, Eurocentric. So we should really discuss this as well, of course, from our different perspectives. But I think this is something which really takes into account a lot of different sides. So yeah, that's from my part. And I would love if we still have the time to invite the others to comment on that, because I left out probably a lot of very interesting points.
Anyone else want to comment before we wrap up our wonderful conversation for today?
Thank you so much. Lori just corrected me that she speaks for the Yamazi people. Yeah, but it would be good to hear and share with CSW the recommendations of Indigenous women, especially living with Indigenous people, territories. Yeah, thank you so much. Where states face debt crisis. Yeah, very good.
I love that. Okay, I don't think that there are any other comments, but as we wrap up, I want to say thank you to all of you participants for joining us today, for sharing your input and your lived experiences with debt and in your local economies or national economies or global economies. Thank you for being part of these very interesting conversations. We've taken note, of course, of many of your recommendations and experiences, so that hopefully we can take it back to those who are going to be making decisions. And of course, a huge thanks to Rachel from NGO CSW for helping us in the background and making sure everything went smoothly and we were all shuffled in and out of breakout groups. And a final and huge thanks to my co-moderators, Karine, Rosa, and Angeline. Thank you so much for, it's been a few busy days of just putting things together and ensuring that we could have as best a conversation as possible. So we thank you for your hard work. Please continue engaging with us. I know in the chat, there's been some really great links. There's also a link to the NGO CSW website. So please, sign up to get updates through there, follow on social media. And I hope that you continue engaging because I know that there's a few days left of CSW. So please continue attending various events.
Let's invite everyone to open up their videos and their microphones and in CSW fashion say goodbye, adios, or whatever you want to say.
Great idea.
Adiós. ¿De dónde eres, Rosa? Rosa, where are you from?
Mexicana, Americana. I'm from California and my parents are
California,
from
Alta
Mexico.
Americana. Okay, I'm from Argentina, but living in
Oh,
Boston.
gracias.
Gracias.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank
you.
Open up your
Bye-bye.
cameras. We want
Take
to see you.
care.
Oh,
Thank
Apu,
you.
that's great.
It's great to see you.
Adios. Thank
Bye.
you for being
Adios.
here.
We don't want to leave. We don't want to leave.
I know. That's good. That's
That's
good.
good. Yeah,
It was a
let's
great
stay in contact.
session.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for being
Bye-bye.
here. Hey, Laurie, talk later. Bye.
Thank you,
Bye-bye.
Laila.
Thank you,
Rachel.
everyone.
Yes.
Thanks.
Thank
Thank
you.
you, Rachel.
Yes, Rachel.
Woo!